Hello, everyone. This is Jim Wilson from Conversa. Really glad you've joined us today. In a couple moments, David Danielson is going to be talking about the DNI and how you can use it to complement your SEO. Before we get started, we will be having questions at the end, so if you have some questions, you can type them into the question box, and at the end, we'll go through those and answer everybody's question. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to David Danielson at this time.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. You know, one of the things that we want to make sure we do here with Conversa is we're constantly evaluating how we do what we do, and we're looking to get better for you each and every week. So one of the things that I wanted to start off with is if you could help me out, go to the questions box and just drop in the location where you're calling in from today. Perfect. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Michael. All right, I'm seeing a bunch of them trickle in now. You know, one of the things that we want to do here is there's a lot of ways to think about how to approach SEO and improving your SEO strategy from an end-to-end perspective. And today I'm going to take a very, what I would say a very call tracking centric approach. But feel free at the end here, we can have a nice dialogue about some of the other ways that we can bridge these ideas and make them more applicable to you and how you're running your business. So one of the things that I want to do is I'm actually just going to pull this off to the side. Hopefully you guys, it will render well. And a lot of the things that I want to talk about first begin with an experience that I had. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in the mountains, and as marketers, we spend a lot of time dabbling in all kinds of things. And I don't know if any of you have been up to Payson Canyon or made your way out to Utah before, but we have some of the largest and most remarkable mountains anywhere in the planet. And one of the advantages that we have is that the conditions in the mountains are always changing. And so some days you'll go up, it'll be dry as a bone and perfect riding conditions or hiking conditions. And the next time you go, it's kind of a muddy mess. And one day I was cruising down this trail right kind of near this area by the Grotto Trail. And I was riding my mountain bike, and I started, you know, you can feel the wind in your face, and the tires are beating against the ground. And I came up on a ridge to an area where I had never biked before, and I realized that on one side there's this precipice, and on the other side you have safety in the fact that you have like a 3-foot wide trail. So I came up a little bit aggressive on the trail and hit my brakes. And for a moment, I thought everything was going to be fine. And about midway in the air, I stopped. And my thinking started speeding up. I was, you know, focusing on, oh my goodness, how am I going to get off of my bike? And we'll come back to that story in a minute, and we're going to tie that back into call tracking. But in that moment, you're evaluating some of the most important things that you want to do. And I want to take some time in this presentation to talk about some of the most important things that call tracking does for SEO. Some of them you're going to find are not going to be perfectly applicable to you and what you do, depending on the size of firm that you have. But many of these things are going to have some direct correlation back. And then we're going to tell you how to avoid those dangers the way that, and then we'll go back and we'll recap on the story in a bit. But I'm cruising down a trail that looked a little bit like this, right as it comes around a bend and then stops. So as marketers, we're faced with pretty consistently very similar challenges. I see these challenges basically in these big bucket areas. Really, when it comes to the business, they're really trying to push down how are you going to reduce customer acquisition costs, how do you prove marketing value to the business, and as we become more value-driven and less cost-driven, the business is starting to look to marketing to take more of a leadership role. And proving our value is now going to become part of our DNA as marketers. It's not going to be we're a cost center and, oh, we generated a bunch of leads. It's going to be we invested this much money and this was the return that we got. Increasingly, as marketers, scoring our leads and our channels is becoming incredibly important. There are just so many dynamics that happen in each of these big buckets. I feel like, for me as a marketer, I'm on the hook to create closed loop attribution, really starting to tell the story from the very first early customer engagements all the way to the closed deal, and even going deeper into the sales funnel after that. I know that to be great marketers, we need detailed insights into the buyer's journey, and we need to really move past what I consider to be last touch attribution. The idea that whatever the customer did the last time they engaged with us was the cause of their purchase. We really need to get away from that model because there's so much value in looking at a broader understanding of the customer journey. Lastly, we're going to be driving revenue. I have KPIs that are directly related to our business's growth goals and strategy, and I think that we all should. I think it's important for us to be down the pipe focused, but also looking at short-term, mid-term, and long-term revenue for the business. And then one of the things that I hear a lot from marketers is, I already have a bunch of web traffic, how am I going to capitalize on it? So in our discussion today, we will hit on some of these items, some of them more in depth, some of them a little bit higher level, but I'm going to show you how some of these things come together as part of your global SEO, SEM, and digital marketing strategy. There are definitely components that we can make for offline improvements, but really we're going to focus on primarily those bigger bucket areas. So strategy number one, getting into the nuts and bolts here, is really around implementing dynamic numbers. And I know that there's a lot of press out there historically that's talked about how risky dynamic numbers are and that businesses shouldn't do them because it could negatively impact your local SEO. And I want to walk through that strategy at kind of a high level and show you how robust call tracking platforms handle this so that you can get the benefits of dynamic numbers at the same time that you are able to get the benefits of local SEO. So strategy number one is to implement dynamic numbers. For those of you on the call who don't know what it is, I'm going to jump in for a minute and just have a quick high-level discussion. Dynamic number insertion is our industry term for dynamic number swapping. And really what that means is that when visitors come to your website, they get serviced up a unique phone number per session or per visitor who comes to your site. And this is really relevant for later components of this presentation. So I wanted to touch on it briefly and share with you a little bit about how this works, particularly through the lens of visitor level tracking. So if you are in the scenario where you have decided, I want to get better customer journey information, I want to take those visitors, I want to track them, and I want to connect them to their outcomes that they have, this is the process that you're going to want to follow. So just super high level, those visitors come, they come to your website. Basically, we give you a little bit of JavaScript code that sits on your website. It's easy to plug into any HTML situation, and you take that code, and what it does is programmatically we are going to determine whether that visitor has been to your website before, how many times they've been there, And then we're going to capture a little bit of information from that visitor, and we are going to send that data. You'll see it here in the form of this little cookie guy. We're going to find that information. We're going to take it. We're going to keep a copy of it for us so that we know who they are. And then every time they come, we're either going to update that information to show that they'd come again, or we create a new cookie and we give it back to the user. So what's valuable here is that the DNI will recognize that visitor and serve him up his own specific phone number. So regardless of how many phone numbers you have on the page, if you have a company phone number, a sales phone number, a parts phone number, depending on your approach to business, we can actually have a dynamic number for each of those categories, allowing you to keep track of this type of visitor coming from these locations, does these types of activities before he makes phone calls. And we're going to touch on that even in more detail a little bit later. But needless to say, what we're doing is we're starting to gather much more granular data, and then we're going to give you the ability to make decisions on that data. So when that data comes, we see that individual, we run our little JavaScript, and we service up that customer a unique number from your pool. Now, your pool could contain a pool of 800 numbers. It could be a pool of local phone numbers. It doesn't really matter what it is. You can pick your strategy, and our team will focus on whatever's the best strategy for your business if you chose to use a tool like Conversa. And what we would do is we help you design that pool so that you're maximizing the value of that visitor coming to your site. So we do this so that each person that comes actually gets a unique phone number in their session, and then we're tracking them all individually, gathering data about their path. So one of the things that I touched on earlier is that there's some dangers in local SEO with what I would consider flawed approaches to dynamic numbers. Now, there are several key characteristics that are key to maintaining high levels of high quality local SEO. And we're going to flip over. I'm sourcing Backlinko on this, or Search Engine Land, depending on what the content that we're looking at. But strategy number 2 is, now that you have dynamic numbers, you need to implement it in a way that you're protecting your local SEO for your business. Now, when we look at local SEO ranking factors, there are several depending on your priority and your strategy for gathering visitors from local traffic. And I've highlighted on here this idea that your NAP, which is name, address, and phone number, there are 2 big factors. One, do you have a NAP on the page? And those pages can be localized. They can be landing pages. They can be home pages. But there's quite a few strategies involved in having very robust local SEO. The pieces I want to touch on is this idea that when you implement a technology like a DNI, there's this risk that people have that the phone number is not going to be consistent. And as you can see how high of a ranking factor those are, when you're looking at local SEO factors, it's a huge consideration. So the way that we recommend that you implement it is you actually have your default phone number, which you actually embed in your JavaScript. This section right here is your JavaScript. And what we do is you always have the static phone number, which is your main number, but when the visitor comes, we quickly switch that out. And the way that our programming works is that if it's a bot from Google or from Bing or any of the other SEO querying tools, we actually tell those tools to ignore this code so that it doesn't look at it. So when a customer comes, they always see your static phone number, and you preserve your NAP that high level of consistency, and that you actually have a name, address, and phone number consistent on your website so that you can get those citations and references that build that consistency, which boost your local SEO power. So when you embed those components, this is how we protect the NAP to make sure that you're not going to lose rankings for capturing this added value through DNI. So now that those components are in place, you've implemented DNI, you've implemented it in a way that you're protecting local SEO, the next strategy that you need to do to improve SEO is actually get visibility into the different channels that are driving engagement. So when we talk about engagement, a lot of customers focus on what I would consider social media engagement. And what I like to focus on, and I think is even more valuable, is calls are actually a symptom of late stage buying behavior. So if you think about calls, we'll touch on this again in a minute, but I think there's something very relevant about working through this concept of getting channel visibility, because you need to start identifying which SEO terms ring true at different stages in the buying cycle. So as you evaluate your sales funnel and you're evaluating keywords, you might find that certain keywords generate calls and certain keywords generate clicks. That definitely dictates how you want to improve your SEO strategy, because on my side of the equation, for our business, I actually optimize for calls, because that tells me that the customer, when they are at the edge ready to make a decision, they pick up the phone. They don't click a form fill, they don't download a white paper, they don't do what I would consider traditional marketing tactics. When a customer is ready to buy, they pick up the phone. We need to figure out which channels are creating those calls, and we need to optimize our overall SEO strategy around those key components. If you were to look at this example, I just pulled a screenshot from our application yesterday, and one of the things I wanted you to look at is a lot of our calls come from these offline sources. So if I had a unique phone number on a business card or a flyer, or I put up a phone number in a trade show booth or whatever it was, we generate a surprisingly high number of calls from offline activity. We're a digital company, we're a software company, we have web forms, we have lead forms, we have all those white papers and all those kinds of components. But what's surprising is that we have this very unique balance between calls from offline, which is our #1 generator, and then quickly after that we have this mega category called online, which is really code for our website. And then we have a bunch of calls that come from very specific SEO keywords that we run ads for in Google. We get a little section of calls from Google+, and we have even a few handful of calls that we get pretty regularly from the other search engines like Bing and Yahoo. And I think many times we overlook some of we go for the big fish with Google, but we also find that there are different buying patterns across the different search engines, which are considerations that we should be making. Remember how I was talking about this classic sales funnel? And I think this is basically the modern day marketer's view of a sales funnel. And a lot of times we always focus on the very top half of this equation, the awareness, consideration, evaluation, purchase. That was drilled into us in Marketing 101 classes when we took those long ago, right? But I think what people are overlooking here is when you start looking at channel identification, different channels are better at generating awareness. Some channels are better at generating consideration. Think for an example like a white paper lead. That would be a good type of a lead for somebody who's looking in that consideration and evaluation phases. Awareness, you see a lot of people pushing on social media as a good awareness model, and you're starting to see people pick up things like influencer marketing to start really starting to connect awareness back to this funnel that you're focusing on. The top half of the funnel we talk about a lot as marketers. What people don't talk about a lot is the bottom half of the funnel. And the majority of revenue from a business should actually be coming from either referrals or upsells of your existing clients as they grow their business with you. So a lot of companies that we work with, they're going to continue to grow and become more successful. Well, we want our customers to grow with us, right? We want to help them as they really start to adopt your product or technology. There's this adoption phase or activation phase that I consistently see in the market. They start to build loyalty to your brand and your products, and then they move to that next level of advocacy. When I'm thinking about those different stages of the sales funnel and thinking about the implications for SEO, there are so many different areas where we want to focus SEO efforts. So not just at the top of the funnel, which is where most of us focus our SEO. We want to start looking at each of the layers and figuring out what SEO pieces of content would be timely and relevant that would help a customer make a better informed decision to continue to purchase with us, but also to continue to purchase with us after the fact. So being able to identify those components that keep the customer engaged, providing him an ongoing level of content that's easy for him to find, that points back to you, continues to reinforce this loyalty and advocacy that you're going to take care of that customer now and in the future. So where do most businesses get calls? Because of our unique platform, we have the unique ability to go in and look at conversion rates by calls, and I can tell you that information by industry. We can tell you that information by pattern, and because we filter those calls down by conversion, it's very easy to go in and listen to 20 or 30 converted calls, and we can tell you very clearly that most of your business calls actually happen much farther down the funnel than people think. So a lot of marketers right now are focused on all of these clicks, which are at the top of the funnel, which I would say are the most risky of your leads. And then they overlook some of the most valuable leads that you have, which are the ones coming in right before a purchase. So if you were to take your business approach and you optimize for calls over everything else, then what would happen is you wouldn't have enough flow at the top always. But the upside would be is that your conversion rates on your leads would be extremely high. And just to give you kind of the macro numbers here, when you start looking at lead value, a form fill lead is probably between 7 times, or let's look at it the other way. A call is probably worth 7 to 10 times the value of a web form fill lead. And we've calculated the data out. When we initially did our research, it was 10.1 times more valuable for our customers. We've actually broadened our industry coverage in the last few years, so we actually have more customers across different industries. And I haven't had a chance to go in and revisit that data. But when you look at a form fill lead, a lot of times those are very unqualified, uninterested buyers. But if somebody's taken the time to pick up the phone and call you, they're very qualified and very willing to engage in purchase with you. So just wanted to make sure we highlighted that so that we could understand why we're looking at SEO and how it ties back to call tracking and why we're going to prioritize that above other things. All right, strategy number 4. We really want you to focus in on the best SEO terms. Now, I grabbed a quick screenshot here of some SEO terms. This is a sample search terms report from Bing. And if you look at the search terms, it's the first thing in the bracket. You've got luggage, North Carolina, scores, Microsoft Store, MSN videos, etc. You're seeing these impression clicks And you're seeing the fact that they have some impression levels, but they never actually generate any clicks. So my question to you is, if you were looking up your SEO rankings and you were looking at your search terms and you're doing your basic, what I would consider basic level SEO research, and you're evaluating terms, which terms would be the most valuable to you? Is it the ones that generate lots of impressions and no clicks? Is it the one that generates a lot of clicks? Or is it the one that actually generates a lot of sales? And one of the things that Conversa does unique to our competitors is that we evaluate what happens on the calls, and we send that conversion data to whichever platform you utilize to diagnose the effectiveness of your conversions. So for many customers, they have some type of bid optimization platform. For other customers, they use Google Analytics, which would be the majority of us. And so we'll actually take those conversions and send them to Google Analytics. So now you can close the loop on your purchase and see the fact that it actually turned into an appointment, a purchase, or otherwise. So when you get that added visibility, what happens is now you're prioritizing your keywords over the ones that are actually driving calls that convert. So when I look at our SEO strategy, we had some terms that we recently started building up in our SEO portfolio. We had some terms that we were ranking for, and what was surprising is that they had very, very high close ratios. So the customers, there were very few people coming in through that path, but when we evaluated the data, we actually found that they were some of the most valuable customers coming in the door. They meet a very specific segment of our buyer. They tend to be more valuable than other calls from even other channels. And so we went through and evaluated those terms based on conversion, and it gave us some insights that we otherwise hadn't had. So as I'd mentioned, when we talk about these keywords, we're focusing on the ones that are driving the most conversion because we actually want to be more results focused. So let me walk you through an example of a customer journey that might be relevant to you. So let's say your top of the funnel approach is that you're going to run some form of Google SEO strategy. So you've found a keyword that you want. You've either packaged it up as an ad or you've packaged it up as some content, and they go to Google, they search for that keyword, and they find you. Well, a lot of times in your customer journey, that customer isn't going to purchase from you the very first time. In fact, many times, and what we see is we have very consistent patterns for our buyers in the types of journey paths that they take. Some they search for very specific keywords. They end up seeing us on some other type of referral page, maybe like a review site or something like that. Then they'll go back in, they'll do some more Google searching for related terms, and when they see that we're on those terms, they come to our website that way, and then maybe they'll make one last step to visit our website, and then they pick up the phone and call. So being able to capture all the way from your ad all the way through gives you a next level visibility into the results of what your components are doing and how effective they can really be as your overall marketing strategy develops. Now, when we looked at this, we found a variety of keywords that we were overlooking. We also found that some of these referral sites could have benefited from stronger anchor text, driving people to a more targeted site for content that they thought would be more relevant. So we actually built up some of our backlink strategy around some of our referring pages so that customers that were referred from certain sites went to content that was more driven around the things that they needed to learn and wanted to know. Here's another simple example. Whether you're running Facebook ads because you're, whatever type of approach you're taking, or even retargeting ads, you might find that your ad has value, but you're not able to necessarily connect it all the way back through the entire journey. when your customer finally makes a call to us and they come in through those tracking numbers, we are able to connect the dots for you. This is just another simple example on a Facebook ad. They did a Google search and then they made the call. Here's another, what I would consider a more typical example for Conversa. Although not usually through LinkedIn ads for us, I would actually say we're probably more on the front end with SEO and a little bit less on the ads now. But as you look at the development of this process, they found a keyword that we were targeting through some content. We delivered it in LinkedIn. They did a Google search for a very similar keyword. They landed on that page. They came back a few days later and went to a different web page, and then they made the call. And being able to see attribution at this level really starts to change which pieces of content are the most valuable in the eyes of your customer and in the eyes of your business. And just to give you an example of what this would really look like, I pulled a screenshot, not of our most common paths, but just to give you an idea. Some of our customers, this is kind of a batch in the middle where they came through. I kind of got down past some of our SEO stuff, but I wanted to be very targeted, and here's a bunch of our paid search traffic. They came paid search, then they came direct. If you were only looking at the last touch attribution, you would actually say, oh, they came direct to our website, we're not going to give them any attribution. When in reality, your ads actually created those calls that drove these customers. And I think that it's very valuable to understand that you're putting in marketing dollars, and we really need to understand where those are converting. Sometimes they convert as clicks and web form fills, and sometimes they're converting as calls and conversations. So just want to kind of give you a quick example of what that would look like straight out of an AdWords report. The next strategy that I wanted to highlight is really this idea around bid optimization. So when people go out and they implement bid optimization, they are really looking at how do I streamline and become much more cost effective in our bid strategies around our targeted keywords. And as you develop your SEO strategies and determine which keywords you want to bid for, you might find that there are enough keywords that you want to chase via organic and some that you want to chase via bid strategy. We've partnered with a couple of the larger vendors like Acquisio and DoubleClick so that we can funnel our unique sets of data. What's very unique about Conversa in this context is that not only do we evaluate the call for conversion, but we can evaluate it for all kinds of characteristics. We have about, depending on what's important to you, many of our customers gather as many as 20 to 30 different types of indicator data on what's happening on those calls. Some of those indicators we bundle together. Think of them like a super indicator, like conversion is a super indicator. It can tell you if the customer gave you credit card language in a call or payment language. It also triggers if we see that an appointment was set. We also can see if there was actual sales language. We can tell you if an objection was handled on a call. All of those types of behaviors on a call would lead you to optimizing your bids based on different characteristics. So you might find that certain keywords generate appointments and certain keywords generate conversions, and optimizing for that process can create a lot of value at a macro and a micro level. And it was very interesting when we partnered with Acquisio, their quote was that there's valuable gold buried inside phone calls and conversations. And our job was to partner with them to help customers actually harvest and sift through the garbage and find the most valuable call data so that they can optimize around those key components. So how can bid optimization help SEO? I think primarily you want the right data to optimize your algorithms. I think it's a flaw when people are optimizing around clicks that never convert, and I think there's some inherent risks in making sure that we're optimizing for driving those key components that improve conversion. There's also this idea that we want to start connecting certain outcomes to certain keywords as we start to evaluate our SEO strategies, which will roll down into either our content strategy, our bid strategy, or some of our other off-page or off-site SEO optimization components. As I mentioned, we have out-of-the-box integrations for Acquisio and DoubleClick. When you start looking at Acquisio, when you look at the key areas for targeting, really optimization really comes back to this idea of keyword selection. Being able to connect your keyword selection, your placement, your different ad types, you can actually characterize those inside of Conversa. We can look at calls and componentize each of these other pieces so that you can actually see those pieces of ingrained data in your call reports or the data that we forward to an optimization platform like Acquisio. When we start to look at the evaluation of platforms in this space, we're going to continue to see this adoption of machine learning and manipulating algorithms. But I think that people often forget that even when you're doing just your strategic decisions around AdWords, that you're going to be looking at whatever your bid rules are going to be. So any data that informs you, the reason that machine learning is more sophisticated and arguably very expensive is because it takes more components together to make decisions. Algorithms are the same way. But as users, if we could prioritize which components, which rules that we want, we can actually be very, very successful when we look at outcomes versus what I would consider vanity metrics. Obviously, harvesting this data, you're going to leverage each platform that you're leveraging, whether you're strictly Google or you're playing with Google, Bing, and Yahoo. You would want to evaluate which keywords and search terms turn into the greatest gold, as it were, for each of those platforms. All right, getting down towards the seventh strategy, and the one that I think probably creates the most value for marketers, is actually digging in and actually getting insights from calls themselves. I've actually been very surprised at listening to calls, and hearing customer call intent allowed me to uncover new and untapped SEO keyword terms that none of my competitors were ranking for. So we were able to go in and then target some of these other unknown keywords based on the language of calls. And what I did is I actually just took and filtered down those calls based on conversions. So I can listen to all of the calls that converted, or I could choose to listen to calls that didn't convert, and identify language patterns and conversations around, are my messages connecting end to end? Are the SEO strategies that we're implementing, are they driving the right kinds of calls? If somebody calls after going to one of our targeted pages, are they having the conversation that we thought they were going to have, or are they having a different conversation? The other thing that we found by listening to calls is that I was able to uncover specific types of content and information the customers wanted to learn about. Some components of this presentation are actually the fruit of that. Many customers have been leery about adapting dynamic numbers. They could see the value, but they were so concerned about ruining their local SEO that they were hesitant to pull the trigger. And understanding exactly how those mechanisms work actually gave customers insights and confidence in making really good decisions to implement technology that would benefit them in the long run. As you're looking at this report, we just went in. You can email these phone calls, you can make comments against them, you can tag a call and say these calls were relevant to these keywords. and then you could go back in and then build a small report that would say, show me all the calls that had these criteria. Or you could export that data, which would allow you to develop some patterns around which SEO keywords are showing up in calls, and starting to mirror your language strategy around the way that customers talk about you and your products. Now, I've snuck in a couple other strategies just to paint a picture for you. What we found in our data is that customers that implement these types of strategies, particularly when they move beyond last touch attribution, they consistently improve their attribution by about 33%. And this number ranges quite a bit. We found some customers, their improvement was single digits, but they were such a large customer that it turned into literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just being able to connect calls to your customer journey turns into this great ability for you to improve attribution and increase your success. And then other strategies that you can consider. When we start looking at strategic keywords, these are the keywords that you want to build anchor strategies around. And what I mean by that is there are some pieces of core content that will drive significantly more value to a customer as you start to prioritize which ones are your strategic keywords. There's obviously the on-page keywords that you want to focus on, but also overlooked in this is the navigation. Being able to build out website navigation around the type of content and process that your customer goes through to make a purchase can shorten sales cycles and improve your business and how you acquire customers. Going back to our mountain biking journey, when I had mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, I was cruising very quickly out of the mountains, came around this bend on this new turn I'd never been on, and what I faced was a 3-foot wide gravel hill trail, and I tried to stop because I was going way too fast. Well, I stopped in the air trying to figure out what was going to happen, and I had for a moment in my mind all of these rushing ideas about how can I get this undone, how can I get off of my bike, and the reality was that I could only do one thing, and I was able to put my hands up in time to protect my head. And sometimes when we think about marketing and we think about SEO techniques, what I want you to take away from this is don't try and slay the dragon in one day. Find one piece, one idea from this conversation that you could adapt and leverage that would help you improve your marketing. Don't try and adopt all of the different strategies. Think about the one that resonated for you that you think would be the most valuable. Because if not, then you're going to end up like my son, who's in this picture on a different day. He came down and he had the same experience that I had. We put out our hands to save ourselves. His hands got a little dirty. My hands and body got pretty mangled up. And I think what's important is think about the one thing that you can do that's going to improve you so that you don't have to deal with muddy hands and that you can get the most value out of your marketing that you possibly can. Anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us, and I'd like to open this up for some caller questions, and we'll go from there. If you're still engaged and you have some questions, drop them in the chat for a minute. All right, it looks like we've got people dropping off already. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and really look forward to connecting up with you guys again, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on some of these other topics in future webinars. Is Acquisio and DoubleClick available? So DoubleClick is available from Google. It's their bid optimization product, and Acquisio has their own platform. Yes, they are available. Unfortunately, we don't have a partnership that gives you a discount on them yet, but if you ask for it, that might be something I'd be willing to reach out for on a future situation. But thanks for the question, Wendy. All right. The other piece I wanted to do today is I wanted to ask for candid feedback. Did you like the webinar? If you did like it, give me a yes. If you would like something else in the future, give me, this wasn't my favorite, and I'd like to learn about something else, and drop it in the questions field, and I'll go through and I'll look at those options and see if I can build you something even better. All right, thanks everybody for attending, and looking forward to catching up with you again in the future. Jim, I'm turning the time back to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. Great webinar. We will have this available, the recording available, posted, and we'll inform everyone who's attended about the link for that. And within a few days, we'll have the full transcript also posted. But thanks again for attending. We appreciate it. It's always wonderful to be able to share some of the insights that we've gained, and hopefully they can be valuable to you. Keep your questions coming, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you much.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.